Hello there lovely people, it's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today it is finally time to review Crash Bandicoot Sane Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by me, so let's not waffle any longer, let's dive right into things. 3D platformers have come a long way since their inception, but back in the mid-90s, the genre was a wild west of ideas and applications. It's weird to think of something as straightforward as moving around in a 3D space being a technical challenge, but that was absolutely the case, as the flood of mediocre attempts to cash in attest. Thankfully, there were some efforts that proved to be more memorable than Bubsy 3D, and although Super Mario 64 was undoubtedly the king at the time, Crash Bandicoot gave people a very different kind of 3D jumping simulator. This offering is a trio of the first 3 games released in the series that have been remade from the ground up with all new assets, the classic example of a remake. You take control of Crash as he runs through a series of linear levels, smashing crates, grabbing fruit, and eventually making it to the end. Unless you die. This is true for the most part in all 3 games, but there are occasionally levels that mix things up a bit. These include riding a motorbike in a sort of race, riding a jet ski, riding a polar, but basically an awful lot of riding things. The core gameplay is probably closest to something like Super Mario 3D World in design, but with more long corridors and only the occasional branching path. The primary objective is just to get to the end in the first game, and in the other 2 you're required to find a power crystal that's usually in plain sight and then reach the end. It's a simple premise and works in the game's favour. There aren't a huge amount of mechanics or moves to learn and remember, it's just good old-fashioned 3D platforming, just not as open as a Mario outing. However, the way in which you control Crash is quite different. Despite having an analog stick at your disposal, the original games were designed with a D-pad in mind, meaning your directions are notably limited. This, surprisingly, is actually a benefit, as many times you'll just want to move forward and not drift 1 or 2 degrees to the left or right, potentially throwing you off course. You can use the D-pad instead, and for some, this may well be preferable. The game boasts analog input with the stick, but it's really not worthwhile. Crash walks or Crash runs, there isn't really anything in between, and walking was something that we never really found useful whilst playing, again likely due to the original game's design. As for the actual jumping and platforming, well, that's a meaty subject. The levels are fantastic to run through, but Crash feels strangely floaty, and jumps can take a few frames to kick in, which means enemies you feel you should miss end up catching you out. Various jumps also feel unusually challenging, especially in the first game. What appears to just be a standard chasm can require near perfect timing, or you'll just hit the very edge of the platform and irritatingly slide off. This is supposedly due to the hitboxes used for Crash, which are rounded rather than square. We repeatedly failed on several jumps time and time again when it really felt we should have been able to make it. And it's a real shame, as it can render an otherwise brilliant level frustrating and repetitive. We do want to point out that these levels are the minority though, and most of the stages are devoid of any of these ludicrous leaps. Speaking of difficulty, these games are seriously tough at points. Some levels we breezed through, but others were really troublesome, causing us to drain all of our lives and having to restart the stage from the beginning. The first game sometimes hides pits behind objects that only reveal themselves when you've got just a split second left to react, which feels like a very cheap move and is thankfully not something that happens in the later 2 games. It really feels like a callback to the platformers of the period, which if anything is a testament to just how accurately the developers have managed to replicate these games. For longtime fans of the series, it's brilliant to see the older games realized so precisely with modern graphics. However, we can't help but feel that a remake is the perfect chance to make changes and fix issues that classic games had. Sane Trilogy sometimes feels like a missed opportunity in that sense. The developers did throw in additional checkpoints to take the edge off, which is very welcome, and it is an absolute boatload of fun for a majority of what the game throws at you, but then you'll come across one section that spikes the difficulty up to an enormous degree without warning, and it'll really take the wind out of your sails. Against normal logic, if you're new to the series and having a tough time with the first game, it may well be worth worth your while to play the games in reverse order. The later games do have more mechanics to learn, but they're still fairly straightforward by modern standards, so it shouldn't be an issue. And they give you the practice that you'll need to play the first game without tearing out every follicle. This collection has clearly been designed with those who played the originals in mind, to the point that there's basically no hint of a tutorial beyond a little bit of text popping up at the side of the screen when you start a new game for the first time. Various techniques straight up aren't even mentioned, such as body slamming to gain a little bit of extra height or crouch jumping, and whilst these don't seem to be required for standard progression, these advanced moves are often mandatory in bonus rooms, and they are never explained. When you do get through each game though, there's plenty to keep you coming back. Unless you smash every single crate in a level, you won't have properly completed it and obtained the illustrious gem that definitely isn't a diamond. There's also a time trial mode in each level, meaning for 100% completion, you have to play each stage at least twice. The crate challenge also often involves taking hidden paths as well, so chances are slim that you'll smash every crate on your first run, and when you spread that over 3 games, that's a serious amount of replayability. Oh, and the Switch version also gets the 2 bonus levels that they've just launched on the other formats too, right out of the box, or digital download. Where the game really excels is in its visual design. Every single screen is absolutely bursting with colour and tiny details, and Crash's Jim Carrey-style rubber face is always ludicrously expressive, and it's perhaps this aspect of the game that has benefited the most from the HD facelift. Whether it's celebrating after completing a level or glancing worriedly behind him as he's chased down by a colossal boulder, the character feels alive. And yes, he did back in the 32-bit PlayStation era as well, but this is where his personality really shines. In terms of performance, Sane Trilogy is locked at 30 frames per second, and we weren't able to find a single instance of a dropped frame, which is obviously marvelous. The resolution, on the other hand, isn't quite as perfect as story, and we've had it confirmed by Digital Foundry themselves that we're looking at a 720p image upscaled to 1080p when in TV mode. You'll also see a lot of anti-aliasing and motion blur, which makes for a softer image than we'd like, but on the plus side, there's not a single sawtoothed edge to be seen. Portable play is much the same, although the game looks even softer than when it is on the TV, as you might expect. Credit where credit's due though, it has been very cleverly handled, and it still looks pleasing to the eye despite this. All in all, Crash Bandicoot Sane Trilogy is a ruthlessly faithful recreation of some of the earliest successes in 3D platforming. Levels are slick, gorgeous to look at, and recreate the feel of the originals superbly. However, newcomers to the series may be put off by the steep difficulty spikes, and there's no explanation for some of the finer mechanics. All the fun and the foibles of the original 3 games are here for better or for worse, and despite some odd design choices, it still manages to be a really enjoyable retread of some old classics, warts and all. This is definitely worth a look if you're a fan of 3D platformers, but just as was the case back in the 90s, Crash isn't quite in the same league as Mario when it comes to playability, inventiveness, and entertainment.